report on our project on multivariate testing for government websites. Like many online communications offices, we rely on analytics and usability to understand how our websites are performing and to also get some data-driven recommendations. But that all kind of stops there. So what we're trying to tackle is to figure out what's an efficient data-driven approach to testing these recommendations, to continue that data-driven methodology from analytics and usability to actually implementing and managing our websites. Well, e-commerce have been fairly successful in a method called multivariate testing. And what this does is it takes all the recommendations and changes on your web pages and applies it and create different combinations with the control and those different changes to figure out the optimal combination. Well, while this has been fairly successful in the private sector, the challenge with doing this in government website is that we're not really selling anything. So we're not in the business of generating leads or generating sales. And while we have some web forms and web applications, most of our content, most of our websites primarily are in the business of content marketing. So there's no really tangible task completions. So the question is, would it even work on our sites? Well, it's really hard to sell this to management when nobody in government has really been doing this. So that's where Ignite comes in. We've been really grateful for Ignite for funding a small pilot and seeing whether this worked. So here's what we did. We've taken 3 different websites, 3 different traffic levels, and 3 different goals, used the insights from analytics and usability, applied it to a tool called Optimizely to generate some multivariate testing. And what we found is that it worked. Based on the multivariate testing data, we found, for instance, for food safety, that this is the optimal combination that generated increased engagement on overall key metrics. But there are some lessons learned along the way. What we found out is that there are some important requirements in doing multivariate testing. First, you have to have the ability to analyze and process a huge volume of data that's coming from multivariate testing. It was also fortunate that we were able to identify page goals and objectives and had the framework in place to be able to measure those goals and objectives. What we also found is that government multivariate testing is different. For instance, in e-commerce, all of those changes you apply to your websites fundamentally goes back to your ability to sell that product. Well, in government, since we're in the business of selling content, what we found is that changes to a particular section directly affects only the goals and the metrics for that particular section. But with that in mind, it is also important to consider how those set of changes affect the other goals. So for instance, in our case study for food safety, what we found is that the optimal variation for the 4 steps campaign had a negative impact on what's cooking and top searches. So that's not necessarily the best combination, right? So for the next chapter, we're applying, we found that we only skimmed the surface, so what we're trying to do is apply it to the rest of the ASPA websites to try to figure out additional lessons learned. And we've also started to create a playbook based on our experiences from multivariate testing, and we're hoping to share that playbook on the HHS Yammer community, hoping to do a webinar with some of our digital networks and also Web Council. With that, any questions?
Excellent, thank you.
I think this is very relevant because we're in the process right now of developing our own internal and external facing sort of websites for our particular office. So I like the concept behind this particular project. My question is has there been any thought given to utilizing the types of concepts and testing that you've done here and utilizing that information to eventually assist in the development of websites as opposed to websites that already exist, for instance?
So at ASPA, we have a analytics framework where we actually integrate external data to inform how we develop websites. So we don't necessarily look at, unless we're redesigning, we don't necessarily look to internal data. So what we've done is when we're developing a brand new website with a brand new topic, we look outside through social media monitoring and through search data to help inform how people are talking about that particular topic. And that kind of informs our approach. That's a good question. How we can utilize MVT is to start to test out some of those theories based on that data to create the optimal website from the get-go.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, I found it interesting. What I would be most interested in is, as you go through the rest of your websites, you talked about your food website and the optimization of that, and then the next one that came up was the tobacco website. Mm-hmm. I'll be interested to find out, how the optimization works from topic to topic, and as those topics vary, what that data will show us, so that if Samson, we had something in the comparable, we might know where to start, with a starting point for optimization versus just taking a shot in the dark.
Right. So a key thing of what we've learned from testing, even just food safety, being tobacco-free, and HHS had varying goals, but one of the key things that we've learned is that it's not necessarily about the topic, but it's also about just the goals. For instance, with food safety, the challenge with that was the homepage. So the key thing there is to generate traffic to key content from within the site. So we were trying to make sure, which is why, as I mentioned, even though 4 steps, the optimal variation for 4 steps was the best for that particular section, because it had a negative impact to what's cooking in top searches, which is also driving traffic to those particular sections. We couldn't pick that combination. We had to pick the next best one that didn't have a negative impact. With Be Tobacco Free, the point of that is to generate things to key sources, which may not necessarily be within the website itself. So we had to kind of measure that against, we sort of have to measure that against, it's not so much as similar to food safety where it's driving traffic to particular parts of the site, but it's also measuring that against how much traffic are we driving to within Be Tobacco Free and also external.
Do you have a sense about how this would, the utility of this for longer-term web-based content like food safety versus some of what ASPA puts out, which is fairly time-sensitive. It's information that might have a shorter shelf life, press releases, things like that. And by the way, I just want to say I thought it was fantastic, mostly because I want to make sure that HRSA's press releases continue to get cleared in a timely fashion. So this was just a great product.
I'll make sure to pass that message
Yeah,
along.
you do that right straight to Dory, please. Yes, great product.
So the neat thing about multivariate testing and what makes it unique is that it's a very agile process. It allows you to test multiple solutions at the same time within a short amount of time. One of the reasons why we've used a tool like Optimizely is it allows the content managers to be able to make changes to the website rather than involving an entire team of developers and other folks to be able to make that change in real time and fairly quickly and be able to assess it, depending on the traffic, of course, in a short amount of time. So with short campaigns, with time-sensitive campaigns, we're able to assess based on analytics and turn it around real quickly using multivariate testing.